Pausing is one of those things that seems like it should be so easy. Every offline game released in the last 30 years has had pausing. Surely this is a solved problem, right? Well, the fact that you found this video suggests you were struggling with how to pause your game. And I'm here to tell you that that is not unusual. Pausing is hard. Way harder than anyone who sits down to do it expects. In this video, we're going to discuss some common methods for pausing your GameMaker game and their problems. And then we'll explore a new method that I think solves most of these problems. So we'll go from a project that doesn't pause at all to a project capable of basic pausing. And then in the next video, we'll enhance the system further to support hit stop and pausing things like particle systems. But before we get started, this video has a few prerequisites. First and foremost, we're going to use the following features of GML. So if you aren't comfortable with these, you might want to go do a bit of studying before continuing. They are arrays, methods, for loops, and with statements. And while I've tried to keep things pretty basic for this first video, the next video ups the complexity a little bit more and makes use of structs, constructors, bonus points for being familiar with the Fluent interface pattern, and advanced array functions. Besides that, you really should watch and be comfortable with the topics in my GM Anatomy video on code execution order. There's probably a link or a card or something on screen somewhere. I don't know, I'm not good at YouTube. Anyway, I'm going to be using things learned in that video to create our new pause system. So go watch that, then come back. I'll wait. Welcome back. That was a pretty great video, huh? Cool. Now we can tear down these other pause systems like the mean girls we are. Probably the most common method for pausing your game is to deactivate all your instances and draw a screenshot of your game to the screen. This works pretty well in some cases and is used in some of the official template projects. It's decent for like a full-on pause menu, where you really want the game behind the menu to be completely frozen. It typically relies on using instance deactivate all to turn off every instance in your game, but it's not perfect. Let's talk about some of the problems. Number one, it's a sledgehammer. I'm always very wary of any function or variable or anything really in GameMaker that uses the word all. And this method typically relies on two of them, instance deactivate all and instance activate all. The more complex your game is, the more likely it is that you have manager objects floating around that you do not want to deactivate. So you'll either have to immediately reactivate them after deactivating all, or use parenting to selectively deactivate specific objects. And what if you're already using deactivation for other reasons? It's super common to deactivate instances that are off-screen in big levels for performance reasons. If you're already utilizing deactivation or planning to for any reason, this system will interfere with that since it reactivates everything indiscriminately when unpausing. Problem 2, you must pause everything on screen. Additionally, with this method, you can't let anything in your game animate while paused. This may not seem like a big deal, but it limits the situations where you can use this type of system. If you're making an RPG and you want to pause your game for dialogue, everything will have to freeze. Shimmering water, flickering torches, falling rain, and wandering NPCs all just frozen in place. It's a bit immersion breaking. You're just talking to someone. It shouldn't freeze time. With this method, you don't have a choice. You pause everything or you pause nothing. Problem 3, zero flexibility. Along those same lines, there are reasons to pause only specific instances at any given time. If you've ever watched Masahiro Sakurai's YouTube channel, he has a video on hit stop called Stop for Big Moments, where he describes how he pauses a character's action, their step event, while continuing to animate things to emphasize impact. If he were to use this pause system for hit stop in Smash Bros., he wouldn't be able to animate the hit stop shake effect, and every time he wanted to pause one fighter for a hit stun, he would have to pause all fighters. Can you imagine playing Smash Bros. With 8 people and every time anyone got hit, the entire screen froze, it would be unplayable. So unless you are making a very simple game with very basic pausing needs, I really don't recommend this method. Another popular method is event exiting. Basically, you have some variable, either a global or a local, and if the object should be paused, it just exits out of any pausable events, typically the step event. So you have to put code in every step event of every pausable object to nope out of the specific event when paused. This fixes the problem of having to freeze everything because we aren't using deactivation, which allows the paused instance to draw themselves rather than relying on a screenshot of our game. It also gives us some flexibility because we can pick and choose which objects respond to the game being paused and can even change what they do while the game is paused. However, it also has some pretty big downsides. Problem 1. Hidden events keep firing. Just because you stop the code from your step or end step event from firing doesn't mean everything about your character will freeze. Remember those hidden events I talked about in the code execution video that you definitely watched before this video? If your object uses the motion variables like hspeed and vspeed, speed and direction, or gravity and friction, these will continue to affect your object's position, even when not executing your step event. That's because these variables affect your object's position in a hidden event between the step and end step. The same issue applies to your animations. If you use the built-in animation for your objects using image index and image speed, your character will just keep on animating. Oh, and we aren't done. What about alarms? Alarms won't pause either. They'll just keep counting down and firing as if the game wasn't paused. To solve all these problems when using this pause method, you have to add code to counteract them. Subtract 1 from every alarm. Set your image speed to 0 when pausing, but set it back to what it was before when unpausing. Same with your motion variables. Be sure to copy all of those into a safe space, set them to 0, and then restore them when unpaused. Ugh. Honestly, it's a nightmare, and a better pause system wouldn't require any of this. Problem number 2. No, you can't use parenting. Yeah, it might be a lot of work, but we could wrap all of that pause logic in a parent, assign all my pausable objects to that parent, and then it will just get handled automatically. Right? Wrong. You can't exit a child event from a parent. So putting something like this in a parent step event and something like this in the child step event means that the child step event will always fire. The exit won't do anything but break out of the inherited parent event. Yes, there are ways around this, and I have personally built a system like this that worked, but it all feels needlessly complicated and a bit fragile. Problem 3. Even if you could, parenting kinda sucks. Let's pretend that you could use parenting to solve some of these issues. Even then, using parenting to give most objects in your game common behavior can get really messy. The larger an object's family tree is, the more complicated things get. Wouldn't it be cool if you could pause any object? Like, the object doesn't need to support pausing. You just say, hey, you're paused, and it just stops. Is such a system even possible? Let's take a step back and establish some goals here based on the problems with the other two popular pause methods. So if we want the best of both worlds, we want a system that has limited to no code required in pausable objects, and doesn't use a screenshot overlay and instead allows instances to continue to draw themselves. It would give us precise control over which objects are getting paused and unpaused, but how? It's the deactivation that makes it so you don't have to put code in objects to prevent hidden events from firing, but it also stops drawing, forcing the use of a full screen overlay. Let's look back at the event order list from the other video. What if we could deactivate instances just for the logic events and then reactivate them for the draw events? Can you do that? Can you deactivate instances just for specific events? Yeah, you can. If we had some sort of controller object that had a list of instances that are currently paused, it could loop through and activate them all in the pre-draw event, allowing them to use the draw events to draw themselves as normal, and then deactivate them all in the draw GUI end event, skipping all the logic events, including the hidden events. It's very unlikely that objects that can be paused need to use the pre-draw or draw GUI end events, and in cases where those events are being used, it wouldn't be too difficult to work around. Let's give it a shot. As I showed at the beginning of the video, I've got a pretty basic platformer project. I have a dude that can jump around, cannons that shoot cannonballs using alarms, and lots of rain particles. The way I like to start building new features like this is to pretend they already exist and then just use them. So if I had a pause system, how would I want to use it? Well, the most obvious would be to have like a pause screen, right? When I press escape, everything on screen freezes and I get a little paused message on screen. Maybe the screen dims or something, so let's start with that. I'm going to create an object called Object Pause Screen and put it in my gameplay room. This object is going to be pretty simple. We just need a variable that tells us if the game is currently paused or not. Let's set that up in the create event. Then, in the draw GUI event, if the game is paused, we'll darken the screen and draw some text. In the step event, we just listen for the escape key and toggle our isPaused variable. Now the screen shows up and looks nice enough, but obviously nothing is pausing. So the next step is to utilize our currently non-existent pause system. In Object Pause Screen, what I'd like to be able to say is, if the game is paused, for now just pause Object Player. And if it isn't paused, unpause them. I don't want my pause screen to keep track of paused elements, because there could be a lot of reasons to pause an instance. Pausing the whole game is just one of them. But I know I'm going to need an object to control it, so I don't really want these to be global script functions. I probably need some sort of manager. And we'll probably call that Object Pause Manager. So we'll assume these methods live on that manager object like so. Now we can make Object Pause Manager a reality. I'll create a new object, name it, set it as persistent, make sure to keep it visible, we will need the draw events to fire, and we'll drop it in our starting room. In the create event, we know we need at least two things already. The methods we just tried to use that don't currently exist. So let's add them. As the person who's making this tutorial right now, I know that I don't actually want to pause and unpause things immediately when these methods are called. I just want to cue them to happen when the pause manager is ready to deal with it. So we are going to add two new arrays to the create event. And then in each of these functions, we'll push the passed argument into the appropriate array to be dealt with later. But before we leave, we are definitely going to need one more thing. These cues are going to be used to add to and remove from a master array, an array that has every instance ID that is currently being managed by the pause system. We probably need that array defined in the create as well. Let's call it paused elements. The next step is to deal with these cues and start pausing things. As we talked about earlier, the ideal place to deactivate things is in the draw GUI end event, the last event any object runs before the start of a new frame and logic events start running. So let's add one of those. Here we use a for loop to rip through our pause queue and a with statement to access those queued IDs. This will make sure that even if an object index is passed, we get individual instance IDs added to our paused elements array. And when we're all done, we can just clear out the queue. Then we do something similar for the unpaused queue. Again, we use a for loop and a with statement, but we delete it from our paused elements array if we find it, and then reset the unpaused queue when we are done. Finally, we need to work with our paused elements array. It's super simple. We have an array of instance IDs. Those instance IDs should be paused. We'll just use another for loop and deactivate everything in there. But we aren't quite ready to test just yet. We need to close the loop. If we are deactivating paused objects in the draw GUI end event, we need to reactivate them in the pre-draw so they can draw themselves. I'm just going to copy this for loop, add a pre-draw event, and paste the deactivation code. Then I just delete the D and we should be ready to go. When we run the game and press escape, that's not good. So this is actually my game over screen. If we crack that dude open, we can see his step event is asking if the player exists. And if it doesn't, that's game over. And since my player is deactivated during the step event, and a deactivated instance doesn't count as existing, this system thinks that means the player died. Now, there are a lot of better ways to handle my game over screen. I should know when my character dies. I shouldn't have to rely on checking if they exist every single step. But this is a pretty common thing, especially for newer developers. If you have a system like this in your project, You would also have problems with the deactivation pause system we talked about earlier. Let's go on a quick side quest to fix this, but if your game isn't set up like this, you can probably skip this next section. I'm going to add a new script to my project and call it instance exists paused. Just like instance exists, it's going to take one argument, an object index or an instance ID. First, we just do a normal instance exists check. If it does exist, we don't need to do any extra work. Let's just return true. However, if it doesn't get picked up by normal instance exists, we need to cross-check against our paused elements list in our pause manager. So we'll loop through the list, and if we find this ID or an ID that has an object index of the given type, we can return true. However, if we get all the way to the end of the array and we didn't find it, then that instance really doesn't exist. We can just return false. Now we just use this anywhere we use instance exists and are checking for an object that may or may not be paused. Fortunately for me, that should just be in one place, the Game Over Manager. Now when we press escape, our character freezes and we no longer see the Game Over screen. Awesome. So now we can pause and unpause without issue. I mean, the player's the only thing pausing right now. That seems like a bit of an issue. So I could just add another line for every object we want to pause and unpause, but that's a bit silly. I could also make a common pausable parent that all objects share, so I can just pause and unpause that one parent, and it's all good. But I was complaining earlier about using parenting for this sort of thing. We got another option? Tags. Tags are awesome. I use them for so many things. If we could just assign tags to the objects we want to pause and then pause based on tag instead of object or instance ID, that would be pretty cool. Let's head back to the pause screen and see what using something like that might look like. So what if we just had two similar functions that accepted a tag or an array of tags? A tag is just a string, so I'm going to rename these function calls and pass in the tag pausable. Now we need to make those exist. This is actually really easy. Back in the pause manager's create event, we add our new methods. Each will use the function tag_get_asset_IDs to get a list of every object that has a specific tag or has any from an array of tags. All we need this function to do is call that function using our passed argument and loop through the resulting list of objects and call our normal pause and unpause functions on each. With those written, the last thing we need before this will work is to assign the pausable tag to things we want to pause. Over in the asset list, let's find our player using the search bar. Right-click and say Edit Tags. Type pausable and hit Enter. Tags are case sensitive, so make sure you spell and capitalize it the same way you did in code. Now when we run, we are back to where we were before, only the player is being paused. But now we can expand which objects are paused by simply assigning the pausable tag to them. And that's really easy to do, even if we have a lot of things we want to pause. Back in the asset list, I'm going to filter by objects. I can hold Control and click on all of the ones I want to pause. Object FX, Object Cannon Ball, Object Coin, Object Camera. Then, over in the inspector, I can hit the Tags button. In this view, I can just use the Select Existing Tags dropdown to assign pausable to all of them. Now when we pause the game, all of those objects pause and unpause perfectly. Everything from our cannons to our little afterimage that follows our pirate dude. If you're using parenting, you only need to add the tag to the parent. No need to go through and give it to each individual child. That's what I did with Object Effects and Object Afterimage. Afterimage is a child of Object Effects, so I didn't need to tag it separately. And that's pretty much the whole system. Of course, there are still a couple of issues. For one, the rain is still pouring. I could add the pausable tag to it, but that wouldn't stop the rain from falling, it would just stop new raindrops from being spawned. This system doesn't know how to pause a particle system. Additionally, this system doesn't make it easy for us to pause things temporarily to get hit stop effects. We'd have to build a completely separate system to pause things for a set amount of time, which doesn't sound ideal. Both of these problems are fixable, but it requires that we complicate the system a bit, and we'll do that in the next video. If you like this video and want to see more like it, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that junk. You can also support me on Patreon if you want. If you have any questions or just want to hang out with other GameMaker users, I recommend joining the official GameMaker Discord server. There's a link in the description. Thanks for watching. Now go make something awesome.